morning for breakfast I eat new Nemo and Crew venison with sweet potato and mulberry. That's what I eat to get me going. In this video I wanted to just discuss a little bit about buying and selling gear, and I guess gas and all these things are fairly familiar for most of us as guitarists. If you have like a little bit of disposable income, I think it's fairly easy to end up spending it on pedals or, you know, the occasional splash on a K-line guitar. But I guess also there's another side of things where you don't want to necessarily end up with loads of stuff sat on a shelf that you're not using. At least that's not something I want. You know, of course you probably have your own things that you want to do, and that's your choice. But anyway, so a couple of weeks ago I kind of started putting together a spreadsheet of the things that I've got sat on the shelf, the things that I use daily and all this sort of stuff. And I thought this might be a good way to kind of sort the thing out in my head and think about whether I want to keep some of these things or whether I could turn some of this into cash instead. So I know that there are probably other strategies for this, so you know, people talk about the idea like what would you save in a fire, but realistically I don't think most of us are gonna come down to sort of one amp, one guitar, one pedal kind of rig. Generally I don't think the economics are there for most of us, fortunately, to have to do that. And I think unless you really had to do that, you know, not a literal fire, hopefully. For me, I don't think I'd ever choose to go to one guitar, you know, particularly when I play jazz and stuff like that as well. There's a semi-necessity for a range of instruments, and certainly for gigging and stuff you need backups a lot of the time. Another method might be you think about things that you don't use so often, so maybe you have like a little quarantine space, you know, you put stuff on this particular shelf or in this particular box, and if you don't pull that out for a certain amount of time, you say, okay, well that means that I don't really need to keep that thing. I think there's another slight idea of kind of collectible stuff, and this kind of thing, I'm not really a collector, but I think there are cases where you can pick up things and make a bit of money. Particularly the TS10 that I bought seems to have gone up in value a little bit, or Klon KTRs maybe go up in value sometimes, or like old way huge pedals. But generally, I think Keith was talking about this, Keith from 5 Watt World was talking about this on a live stream. Generally things tend to increase relatively close to inflation. I think at the moment the Klon KTR is in a bit of a bubble where people are interested in getting them. There's a bit of a shortage. Whether that continues an upward trajectory like the real Klon, I'm not sure. Vintage Strats, I guess, are a bit of an anomaly, and kind of vintage Gibsons generally, I guess, is probably not too sensible to think I'm going to pick up this piece of gear and in 10-15 years it's going to be worth more than I paid for it. I don't think that's the way that most things work. So what I did was I created a list of the pedals and stuff that I own, and I also then kind of went on eBay and checked out the prices that those are going for. What I think this can do for you is then you can kind of start to look at how much you've actually got invested, or, you know, sitting there idly. If there are pedals there that you don't use, and I've just put up some of them on eBay and stuff and sold them. I think I ended up selling 6 pedals, and that turned into £1,000. I sold one guitar, that was £2,000. And so, you know, selling stuff that I'm not using too much, even in a short space of time, and without selling anything that I'm thinking that I'm going to regret, particularly because they're things that I don't really use on a day-to-day basis, already there's £5,000 extra to spend on K-lines when you see them. But anyway, the principle was there and the thought was there that I could sell some of this extra stuff that I'm not using and maybe use the money for something else, like a course for cameras. The other thing I think is patience is probably a real benefit in this case if you're buying and selling. If you're patient when you're buying, sometimes you'll end up not making like a rash purchase which you're going to regret, and then sometimes if you're patient when you're selling, someone might make you an offer 3 days in the past. If you wait, you know, a couple more days, someone might just pay the full asking price. So I think as a seller it generally is beneficial to be patient, and definitely as a buyer, because you might end up not purchasing that thing, you might not make that kind of decision based on emotion and gas and stuff. The other major thing that I think is worth bearing in mind is that buying used, essentially you can buy an item for, you know, what is it, between 50 to 70% of the full retail price generally. So like this guitar from K-Line, this one I bought the other day for £1,500. You know, I don't think it's been played hardly at all, and it would have been £2,500 new. It just makes it that much easier to afford this stuff. You know, with pedals as well, it's generally the same kind of story, or Fender custom shop Strats, whatever it is. I can really realistically tell myself that I can afford to buy a Fender custom shop Strat, but if I can buy one second hand for £1,900, and I'm pretty confident that I could sell that, you know, the next day for that price again because it's a good price, I think that's a good way to potentially do this if you have to do this. If you've got this urge to buy gear and stuff like that, as I guess most of us probably do, buying used, to me, I think is one of the more sensible ways to do stuff. I think anyway. So I'm part of a forum, and also I check out eBay, and that's kind of my key places that I would get gear and also sell gear. I think Facebook Marketplace is also a thing, but it gets a little bit weird on there sometimes. But yeah, buying used just seems to be, to me, you can get way more for your money, and also when it comes to sell the thing, you don't lose money because you already paid basically what the used value of the thing is. A thing being sold once or twice, you know, having previous owners in the guitar world, doesn't really matter. You know, once it's used, and that value doesn't really seem to drop off, particularly if you keep boxes and stuff like that. So that's another little piece of advice. Keep pedal boxes and manuals. I don't understand, some people do chuck these away, but if you find a way to store them, you kind of can get a bit more money for your pedals when you come to sell them. Just before I edit this, I thought of another thing. If you're thinking of buying a piece of gear, the stuff that's really easy to sell are things that are popular. So, you know, a guitar with Fender on the headstock, for instance, is going to be a lot more easy to sell than something from a boutique builder. And likewise, sort of the big pedal brands, I think, are a bit easier to sell than some kind of boutique smaller builders, unless they've got a really big name. So something like a Kingtone Duelist, for instance, if you bought one second hand, you can be fairly confident that you could get that price again for it. A relatively no-name brand, I don't know who to mention, but might be a bit more tricky. So I guess that's something else to bear in mind when you're thinking about buying a thing. If you're thinking, in the future, will I be able to sell this? The things that sell really well are generally the things that everyone knows about, obviously. So yeah, that's my tips for buying and selling stuff. And what was driving my decision making for some of this stuff was just that process of kind of listing some of the stuff that I've got that I'm not really using, and then putting a monetary value next to it, and then kind of adding that up. It made me think, okay, there's quite a lot of money sitting here in these pedals that realistically, am I ever going to use them? I'm not saying that they're not good pedals, it's just that I'm using things like modelers quite a lot of the time, and so, you know, having thousands of pounds locked up in pedals that are really only there as like I occasionally do videos with them, and they're like little experimental things. It's not like my main thing on the channel, as you might know if you're watching. So, you know, selling them is not a big deal, or selling some of them, the ones that I'm not really using. So yeah, maybe you could do the same and try and keep the one upstairs happy. Anyway, let me know your strategies, and then also let me know your vice. My main vice, it turns out, are K-Line Strats, and whenever I see them for sale, I kind of just buy them. Catch you in another video soon. If you want to like and subscribe, you could. Here's some more playing.